Hi, friends. We all have been eagerly looking forward to today's session, and it is my immense pleasure to introduce Mrs. Rupa Pai, India's best known writers for children, one of India's best known writers for children. She has written over 25 books, ranging from picture books to chapter books and fiction to non-fiction, on themes as varied as sci-fi fantasy, popular science, math, history, economics, life skills, and most recently, medicine. And I'm sure there are more subjects that she will cover in future. Many of her books are bestsellers and are enjoyed as much by adults as by children. Her best known books include the 8-part Terranauts, India's first fantasy adventure series for children in English, um, the award-winning national bestseller, The Gita for Children, listed by Amazon India as one of 100 Indian books to read in a lifetime, and its prequel, The Vedas and Upanishads for Children. Her TED Talk, Decoding the Gita, India's Book of Answers, has received over 1.5 million views to date. And her most recent book, which I'm going to actually order after this session because my son is interested in medicine, is called Leeches to Slug Glue, 25 explosive ideas that made and are making modern medicine. She has also co-authored fitness evangelist and supermodel Milind Soman's memoir, Made in India, and is currently working on a book of poetry translation in which she's translating 100 poems of the much acclaimed Kannada poet Padma Shri K.S. Nisar Ahmed into English. And folks, pay attention now, because when she's not writing, she can be found leading groups of children and young people on history and heritage walks across her beloved Karnataka as part of the company called Bangalore Walks that she has co-founded. So next time you're in Bangalore, you can perhaps go on one of those tours. And with that, please join me in welcoming Rupa to our group today. And let me hand it over to Rajesh to start the session.
Rupa, welcome to this. You will have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. And lovely introduction. Thank you, Rajesh.
We're so fortunate to have you here today, and we look forward to learning from you, hearing your journey, and talking to you a little bit about how it all went for you. What we did was, I recall when I first uh, learned about you. It was the time when my daughter was reading the books Taranot series. Now she's 20, and she enjoyed it. And then later on, 7 years back, sorry, when we were relocating back to the US, a friend of mine gifted us this book. Okay, and I'm going to read the note what uh, my friend's daughter wrote to my daughter here in this. It says, "Dear Harshita and Sudit, I know you really like the Taranauts, so I hope you like this one too. It's by the same author. Hope the both of you enjoy this book." And I still have it. We read it and enjoy it. Thank you so much for the brilliance what you do. So with that, Rupa, what I wanted to ask you was, uh, you've been an author, and you started off with Taranauts, the children books, and you transitioned into writing about Gita and Upanishads. How did you get interested in Gita and Upanishads?
Yeah, that's quite a story actually. Because I mean, if you had told me when I was writing Taranauts that in the next couple of years I would be writing about the Gita for children, I really would have laughed and not believed you at all and said it was entirely not possible for that kind of thing to happen. Because when I was growing up, I was a huge Enid Blyton fan. I mean, we were quite deprived children. We only had access to certain authors and certain books. I mean, all of us who were born in the 70s, we know this, right? There was only Enid Blyton to represent England. There was Archie Comics to represent the US. And to represent our own country, there was Amar Chitra Katha, basically. So there were no contemporary children's stories in English from our own ethos that we could read. So I grew up on a steady diet of Enid Blyton. She taught me a lot. She taught me how to write brilliant, engaging stories. She taught me how to write sparkling dialogue and never flagging action. She taught me how to write about food so beautifully that a South Indian vegetarian girl sitting in India would be lusting after tins of ham and tongue, and without knowing what they were, but I wanted to eat them because she just wrote about it so brilliantly. So these were the kind of this was the and she taught me how to write for children about moral stuff without making a big deal about it, without making heavy weather of it, without making it feel like she was preaching, or there was no moral of the story at the end, like our Chanda Mama stories and all used to have moral of the story at the end. But there was no such thing. It was very light, but she ended up teaching me a lot about what is good and what is bad, what is good behavior. So she taught me how to write, and Amartya Katha was brilliant. I adored Amartya Katha, like everybody else of my generation. But they did not talk about children like me. It was all about some storied past, and it was full of asuras and devas and kings and nymphs and heavenly nymphs who came down and disturbed rishis, and all kinds of concepts that we didn't entirely understand, but loved nevertheless because the stories were so compelling. So when I grew up, when I was very young, I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I thought I wanted to write Enid Blyton kind of stories. That was my
Mhm.
goal. I wanted to write adventure and fantasy and that kind of stuff, with the magic, the wishing chair and the faraway tree, the Mr. Galliano's circus, or all those were the things I wanted to write about. And then when I was about 13 or 14, I came across an Indian magazine called Target, which again, many of you here in the group might have read while you were growing up. And it just blew my mind because in Target, they were talking about children like me. They were writing stories about children like me. And they seemed to be having a lot of fun. Until then, I had believed that only British children had fun. And my childhood was somehow suckish because I never got to do things without like 200 adults also being there. And in Enid Blyton books, they always went off on adventures by themselves, and they seemed to have so much freedom to do what they liked, and they were always doing such amazing things. And in India, our picnics were 25 adults and 25 children crammed into one ambassador car and going to a place that we knew already and eating lemon rice and curd rice. So obviously, I thought it was like my childhood was no fun at all, and only British children had good childhoods. But when I read this Target magazine and they were talking about my childhood and they made it seem like so much fun, and it really flipped a switch in my head that hey, maybe I've been having fun all this time. I just didn't see it like that. And then I began to think about how if I was having lemon rice and curd rice for picnic lunch, that meant that somebody had woken up in the morning and made it, had cared enough to do that, and so basically you began to think differently. And so I decided then that I was going to grow up and not just write stories, but Indian stories for Indian children, so that they would never again grow up feeling that somehow their childhoods or their monsters or their kind of lifestyles were not as fun. But and so Tara Knots is a bit, if you read them, and I was so pleased that children also liked them, because I had put in a lot of like little Easter eggs that maybe children never got, but any adult reading it would get instantly. So it had an underpinning of Indian mythology, and I didn't realize it then so much, but it also had an underpinning of Indian philosophy. But until I read the Gita and understood what Indian philosophy was, I didn't even know that it was so much a part of my DNA that it had even been part of my fiction books,
So
my
was it
fantasy
serendipity
adventures.
for you to have discovered Gita and
Yeah, completely.
Upanishads?
So I finished writing Tara Knots. It took 4 years. There were 8 books. And then I was fictioned out in my own mind. I said I
Hmm.
cannot write any more fiction because it was quite a lot of creative thinking to write those books. And then I fell back on my science background. I'm an engineer also. So I said, okay, let me do a non-fiction thing. And I wrote this
I like
science
the way
book
you
on
say
popular
also.
science. Yeah. It's called What If the Earth Stopped Spinning and 25 Other Mysteries of Science. I wrote that. And then again, I was at a loose end and not knowing what to write. And my editor, the same editor who had, published Tara Knots, she said to me, I have a great idea and I know exactly what you should write. And I said, okay, please tell me, because I'm at a loose end. I have no ideas and I do want to write. I'm itching to write something, but tell me to write nonfiction. And she said, yeah, this is nonfiction. I said, what? And she said, why don't you write the Bhagavad Gita for children? So it was entirely suggested by her. And my jaw sort of hit the ground. And I said, absolutely not. And she's like, why? What's the problem? I said, well, I have never actually read the whole text in my whole life. I have not engaged with it. I have not grown up in a home that had a copy of it. And the only Amartya Katha which I didn't read with that much pleasure or thing was the Gita. Because it was only the same scene and giant speech bubbles, and none of which I could understand. So I said that was not exciting. So no. And how? And I was hugely intimidated. I said, people say that they go for years to Gita class and don't get it. How can somebody who has never engaged with it be entrusted with this huge onerous task of interpreting it for young people, especially? And I will definitely not be able to do it. It is definitely not for children. I had all these prejudices about it that,
Mm.
and I said, no, I can't do it. And for some reason, I have no idea why she trusted me so completely to be able to do it, even after I'd given her all these reasons. She said, no, I just think that you are deeply into Indian mythology, and also that you are one of the few people I know who can take a complex abstract concept and interpret it for children. And that's why I want you to try. And so then she sort of, then 6 months, I resisted staunchly. I said, absolutely not, absolutely not. And then she said, just please get a copy of the Gita, sit with somebody who knows a little about it, find out a little more about it. And then if you tell me that it's truly not for children, I'll let you go, but give it a shot. So I went to an aunt, my husband's aunt actually, who used to teach Chinmaya Mission Bal Bharti classes. And she was a fun person. So I thought, okay, if somebody has to relate to me, it's this person, because I can't have this extremely religious type person tell me about the Gita, because then it'll just scare me even more. And then she sat with me and she had a chart paper and she said, okay, let's do a mind map. What is in chapter 1? What is in chapter 2? What is the whole thing? So she presented it visually. And the first session we said we'll meet every 15 days and she will tell me, etc. But in the very first session, she said one thing that sort of, she said, you do know that Krishna and Arjuna are best friends, right? And I said, oh, actually, no, I didn't know, because it was always like Krishna standing like this and Arjuna standing like this. So I thought either it was God and human or mentor and mentee, but never thought of them as friends. And then when she said that, I said, so basically the Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between two best friends. Then she said, yeah. So I said, oh, then maybe I can tell that story to children. Then it's not such a difficult one. And that's how I came to the Gita. And she gave me some 2 or 3 of her favorite commentaries. She said, read it and see. And then my editor called me a month later and said, so what do you think? And I said, if it's even remotely casteist, patriarchal, sexist, I don't want to whitewash it for children. I don't want to have that kind of book go out to kids. So I will not do it. I was so full of myself. And then when by the time I had come to the second chapter, I was so hooked. And by the time I finished reading the second chapter, and then I said, yes, of course I'm going to do it. That's how I came to it,
That's
completely reluctantly. But once I started reading, there was such a consonance. Like I just felt everything that it was saying was something I had always believed, but had not been sure of. And suddenly Krishna was validating everything I had thought. So
right. No, it's very interesting the way that you described your journey, because most of the people would resonate with this. We all grew up with a lot of notions, preconceived ideas that saying that, okay, hey, this seems to be religious, this seems to be,
yeah,
bigotry or whatever, right? And
yeah,
we seem to have that notion. And I picked a couple of things from from what you said, right?
Mm,
You did not want it to be religious, but at the
mm,
same time, you were also trying to express the same concepts in your Taranauts book, but not
yeah,
knowing that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you go about explaining the difference between spirituality and religion to a teenager or to a child?
Yeah, actually, they are so allergic to the word religion itself. So if you start saying religion, they will instantly switch off. So I always, first of all, start by saying these books are just self-help books, the oldest self-help books in the world. And they've been on Indian bestseller lists and global bestseller lists for 2,500 years. So why haven't you read them? You know, you read everything else that's on every best-selling list, and this has been there for millennia. So I think, how would I describe religion and spirituality as separate is, I think religion is about having God as the center, a God, an all-powerful God at the center of it. It's definitely built around that. It has definitely notions of faith, like there are some rules that you have to believe. There are rules and there are rituals. I think that's what religion is. But spirituality is about your own spirit, because that's the root of the word spirituality. How to strengthen your own spirit against all the stuff that the world and your own mind will keep throwing at you all the time. So spirituality is about strengthening yourself, and religion is trusting in something external. um, and I think both ways are fine, whatever works, you know, for you, because bhakti yoga is just as important as gnana yoga or dhyana yoga, and it's equally valid. So whatever works. But Hinduism, I always then tell them, or Sanatana Dharma or Vedic philosophy or Advaita philosophy, is just that. It's a philosophy. It's not a religion, because God is not at the center of it at all. You are at the center of it. It's about knowing yourself, and that is a very attractive thought, you know, in the to children, to make them feel that, you know, really everything lies in your hands. There is no, this whole notion of a Santa Claus sitting up there, a white bearded guy making notes about who's been naughty and who's been nice and handing out rewards and punishments, and this very whimsical kind of being, is a little stretch of the imagination, especially to today's children. They don't they don't buy it. But if you say that it's about you, especially in a generation that believes in individual liberty and you know, all those things, and they believe in countries that celebrate individual liberty, and you know, and the funny part is they think the West celebrates individual liberty. So I am at pains to tell them that there is no nation or society that allows for and celebrates diversity and individual liberty as much as India does.
Yeah,
You
agreed with
know,
you.
a
50
lot
states,
of it.
50
Yeah,
states in the US, and
yeah,
the number of states that we have in India, and the number of languages, cultures, and everything is
yeah.
so different. That's diversity out there. So, Rupa, question for you. You as you navigated through your own journey and trying to understand the concept of God and spirit and self-development, um, yes, religion says that yes, you need to have God at the center and all that. But how do you explain the concept of God to somebody who's a teenager or to a child?
Yeah. So I think I unexplain more than explain the concept
Okay.
of a God, because they have an idea that God is supposed to be, look a certain way, you know, act a certain way, and be this omniscient, powerful, and often scary person who's watching you. Is like, you know, somebody who's watching you and you can't hide from him. He's everywhere. First of all, there is that gendered notion of God, he. So a lot of unmaking is what my work is actually. And it helps me that Vedanta, the Upanishads, are very clear in their notion that Brahman is genderless, formless, and nameless. And all the forms and names we give to this Brahman, which is just a cosmic energy, and which we should hope to grow into, because just Brah just means vast and expansive. So Brahman just means something that's huge and Brihad. And what we should try to be is Brihat. We should try to be Brahman, which means we expand our notion of ourselves from this small I into this big I that encompasses everything. And that is being God. I mean, I think what they really love to hear, children, is Aham Brahmasmi. It's so blasphemous, especially if you think that this is a religious thing. to
Right.
say that I am God. And then I immediately follow it up with, that's not the only Mahavakya. I am God, aham brahmasmi, but tattvamasi, so are you. So are you, and you, and you, and you, and everyone. And to help them understand that notion of a genderless, formless, nameless being or presence or energy, I explain it as, the same energy that gets you out of bed in the morning is the energy that keeps the stars shining, that keeps the planets orbiting around the sun, that keeps the electrons orbiting around the nucleus. It's the same energy. And can you deny that that energy exists? If you do, then we can deny that God exists. But if you want to, you know, hang a name on this energy and you want to call it God, that's fine, but you don't have to. And that
That's
is the
brilliant.
notion of
That's
so,
brilliant. You break down the concept of God we normally understand,
yeah,
in the temples or in church or in mosque, and then kind of explain it like a Brahman and all
yeah,
expansive, and also connect, saying that you are that person. And
yeah,
I also remember you saying sometime back, saying that Gita is the world's oldest self-help book, and you have to grow your own spirit in the whole thing.
yeah.
So did this notion of expanding the mind to become that Brahman connect with you, or how did you reconcile the, let's say, the differences between your own religious background and the concept of Brahman as explained in Vedanta?
Yeah, so I come from a Veerashaiva or Lingayat family of Karnataka. Um, and our founder or our teacher, Basava, who was around in the 12th century and was part of the Bhakti movement, Hinduism has gone through so many reformations. That is the wonderful thing about it. In every age, somebody comes along to reform it. Because as soon as the truths start getting taken over by humans who live in societies and have selfish aims and agendas, the truths get diluted to suit some group of people. It can be the groups keep changing in every society and in every age, but there is one dominant group that decides that this suits us to interpret it this way, so we will dilute it and interpret it this way. And because the Upanishadic truths are so abstract and difficult for many people to grasp, they will go for the simpler. The simple is always very attractive and easy to follow. So anybody who has a attractive proposition will have followers. And then what happens is society gets all high, a lot of injustice begins in the name of religion, and this is attributed to the texts. And because most people don't know what the texts are or haven't been able to read the texts for themselves, you have to believe. So and this is all because fear is such a dominant thing in the human mind.
Right.
We are so fearful that we are willing to grasp at straws. For anybody who offers us some hope, some succor, we say okay. And the whole idea of Vedanta is to make you fearless. That I always say that it's not about being happy. It doesn't teach you to live a happy life. The pursuit of happiness is not the point. It may be part of the American motto: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But Vedantins say they don't agree with that at all, because happiness is such a transient thing. It comes and goes. In what is India's motto is Satyam Eva Jayate. So we're only looking at the truth, not about happiness. And the truth is that freedom from fear is what should be your goal of your life, not happiness. Okay, anyway, so what I was saying was Basava, who is our like guru or teacher, he came along, and in a time when again Brahmins, there were these caste differences, and any Dalit who would make so bold as to dine with a Brahmin would have a huge problem, would be set upon by society. So this troubled him a lot, and he created this new thing, where also this thing about the monopoly of people who knew Sanskrit and the mantras over all the rituals that purported to connect humans with God. So the middlemen who didn't allow man to talk to his God by himself, and said there are certain paths you have to go, and only I am the guardian of these paths. Um, he wanted to dismantle that system. So he wrote his vachanas, which he considered the ultimate truths, in Kannada. He and his fellow vachanakaras, they wrote them in Kannada, which is the language of the people. And they said, like, come on, you can come, God is here. And he also did very socially chaotic, like, which caused a lot of upheaval in society, like marrying a Brahmin to a Dalit girl, boy to a Dalit girl, all those kinds of things, which eventually led to major revolution and his own death, in fact. But he tried all these things. So growing up, I had thought that, and especially nowadays in Karnataka, there is a huge movement which says that Lingayats and Vaishyavas are not Hindu at all. We want a separate religion status because Lingayats reject the Vedas. I mean, openly so, because he rejected the Vedas because he said, if the Vedas say all this kind of chopping up of society into hierarchies is okay, then I reject the Vedas. Then I don't want to have anything to do with them. So they reject the Vedas. They want to be anything but like the people who follow the Vedas. So in the sense, we don't use fire, which is such a big part of Vedic ritual. Agni is the witness for everything.
Yeah.
We don't use fire at our weddings. We don't use fire at our funerals. We bury our dead. So everything that the Brahmins or whatever were doing opposite. So I grew up believing that what Basava said was something very different from what the Upanishads said. And it was only when I actually engaged with the Gita and then engaged with the Upanishads that I began to realize that he was saying exactly the same thing.
Right.
Just it had got lost, and he was bringing the same Sanatana Dharma or eternal law back into circulation in his time in Kannada so that everyone would get it and nobody would be able to distort it. Because if you look at one of his most famous vachanas, Ullavaru Shivalayava Maduvaru, which is, the rich will build temples for Shiva. What can I give you, O Shiva? I am a poor man. And he says, Yenna Kale Kambha, my legs are the pillars of your temple. Dehave Degula, my whole body is the temple. Shirave Honna Kalasavaya, my head is the golden Gopura. And Kudala Sangamadeva was how he called Shiva, or the god that he worshipped. So Kudala Sangamadeva Kelaya, hear me, O Kudala Sangamadeva, O Lord of the meeting rivers. Sthavara Kalivuntu Jangama Kalivilla. He says, like, only that which is moving shall live, and that which is stagnant shall fall. That which is still or rooted or like some kind of stagnance, that will fall. And that's exactly what the Upanishad says. You are God. God is within you. Your body is the temple.
Right.
So when I reconciled the two, I'm like, oh, so he's just saying the same thing, and I felt it was wonderful. It was like an epiphany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your answer reminded me of the movie, Paresh Rawal's movie, Oh My God.
Yeah, I
where you
love
talk
that
about
film. Oh my God.
where you
Yeah, it's called Oh My.
where you talk about middlemen and all that, and that's exactly what he also tries to do.
Yeah.
By the way, I
Yeah.
spent some time about 2 years in Bidar and in Karnataka when I was doing my startup, and I understood a lot about Lingayat culture there, and especially Veerashaiva Basavanna and also
Akkamahadevi.
Akkamahadevi as two big philosophers at that time. So uh, the, and the other thing that we want to understand your perspective in your book. You write somewhere, I recall, let me just get there. You say that in the book you say that the trick is not to think about whether your work will be a success or failure, whether it will please anyone or not, even whether it will make you happy or not, because thinking of results when you should be working will only distract you from the work itself. Now, this is a pretty interesting thing, and this is karma yoga that Bhagavan Krishna talks about. But when everyone is talking about end results focused society today, how do we explain this to the kids, what karma yoga is?
It's surprising, but I've always found it much easier to explain this to children than to adults, because they really get it. They are the ones in the pressure cooker of competition, and many of them have not asked for it. It is sort of imposed on them by their teachers and their parents, who are always telling them this is the only way, that there is no other way. And then all of the media and everything they watch is telling you about visioning. If you can vision it, it can happen, all these things. And here I come, or the Gita comes along and says that, no, 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 that's not how it works. Because it, so when I explain it this way and it usually works. I say that, okay, so I say one of the main core lessons of the Gita, which Krishna says, is just very simple. It's only 3 words and you'll remember it very easily. But practicing it is really hard. And the 3 words are do your, and I leave it. And then they say best, do your something, do your responsibility. Then I say it's actually just do your duty. Okay. And they like look at me and they say, well, that seems simple enough to do. Like, why is it such a big, and I said, no, but there is a rider. There are 3 more words. So do your duty with no expectations. And they're still not getting it. So I say, okay, so what is your duty as a student? And they say to study and to work hard and to come to school on time, submit assignments and be respectful to your teachers. Okay, all that. Why should you study hard? And then this is so they can get a good job and you can do well in school, and it makes our parents happy and teachers proud. And and some of them will think they've cracked it and say to gain knowledge. Okay, that's why we should study. Okay, which is very sweet. And I'm like, okay, that's all very well, but you know what Krishna says? All of them are bad reasons. They're wrong reasons. And they're like, what? Then why should we study? I said, you should study because it is your duty to study when you're a student. That's all. Simply because that is your dharma. That is what you must do. And I say, you know why? Because if you're, one of them is, of course, this, you get distracted from your own effort if you're focusing on the outcome.
Sure.
Then the effort is not 100%. And then there is more chance that you won't get what you want, because you're constantly in the middle of studying for your exams. You're calling up people and say, hey, how much did you finish? Oh, you finished that chapter. Oh my God, I'm still not finished. Then you get worried about that, and anxiety makes you not read the rest. And then are those little things in the gray boxes, are they also coming for the exam? And some say, my teacher said they were, oh, but my teacher didn't, I haven't studied all that. Why? You're just wasting time. Just focus and finish as much as you can with that is one thing. Second thing is, if you are studying, saying, I'm studying to come first, do you realize how toxic a wish that is? Because when you say I'm studying really hard to come first, what you're actually also saying is that anybody else who's studying just as hard or even harder than I has to come second, third, or fourth.
Mm.
So you're actually wishing ill or fail or like lack of success on other people that you consider friends, classmates that you like, and you would not actually wish ill against, but you're doing that when you say, I'm doing this because I have to come first. You're putting I forward. And the third thing is, guys, how much control do you have? Like, how do you know what will happen tomorrow? Can you control what the result is? And they say no. And they're actually agreeing with you, and they're saying no, because suppose there is one thing that comes that you haven't studied. Suppose the teacher who's correcting it is in a bad mood and decides that they should go, or whatever, or you forget at that minute. So many things can happen. So can you control it? No. Then why are you setting yourself up for disappointment? What can you control? Your effort. So just that you put what the things you can control, put all your love and joy and effort into that. Things you can't control, let them be, because what is the point? You can't control them. And they totally get it. And they totally understand. And I say the competition, then if you really are, you say a competitive spirit, then use that competitive spirit to be a better person today than you were yesterday, and a better person tomorrow than you were today. That's all. Your competition is only with yourself. Don't compete with other people. It's not, and it's so counterintuitive. It's so against everything else everybody else is telling them. But they just get it. They get it. And I think and especially 10th graders, 12th graders, I hear that it makes them calmer when they get into exams. Say, I'll just do the best I can do. What more can I do except the best?
Beautiful. That is so nicely answered. As parents, all of us, we struggle with this. All of us have teen children, slightly older than teen as well, but we struggle with this. And part of it, because we also seem to associate that our our self-worth is measured by the results what we're going to get. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the real way of measuring one's self-worth, and it takes a lot of unlearning, or I would say, I think you used some other word in the beginning when you said, okay, unexplaining. I think that was the word that you unexplaining within our own self, that we need to take that thing off from our minds.
Yeah.
So I just want to change tack given the time that what we have.
Yeah.
Just want to talk to you about one thing, um, about rituals, and a related question related to the scriptures. So I'm going to combine these two questions together. So first of all, what's the relevance of rituals in your mind? Isn't just doing good, being conscientious, good enough, or should I just go through rituals? That's one part of the question. The second part of the question is, you know, there seems to be a feeling that women are treated below men in the scriptures. What's your view on that?
Okay. Both are sort of fraught questions, but let's see. So, what is the significance of ritual? I think it helps to explain. So, I'm always coming at it from how do I explain it to children, because that's my primary market. So, I explain to children that a ritual, I know in your mind, seems to be some boring chanting, all the family comes, it's hot, and you're supposed to behave a certain way. You don't understand anything that priest is saying, but you have to sit through it, and you have to have a slightly interested expression on your face, otherwise your parents will be mad at you. So, you just have to do these things, and that is what you think of ritual as. But what about the ritual of having a birthday party every year? That's a ritual too. Or going to visit your grandparents every summer, that those are rituals, and each family has their own rituals, going pizza and movie night on Saturdays or whatever. And what do you like those rituals? Yes, I love them. Why? Because they make me, then they begin to explore, because it's something to look forward to. They make me feel a part of the family, and it makes me feel part of a larger family or whatever and it's something to look forward to every year. It is the one constant thing, that whatever else may be going on, this will be there. I will certainly have a birthday party, which again COVID has ruined, but yeah, this will be there, that I can have a birthday party, I can go visit my grandparents. Those things are like little oases of certainty in the middle of a chaotic life. And when you have rituals like that, like, okay, even watching something at 7 p.m., some serial every day or whatever. Now, of course, everybody watches on Netflix, so there's no time thing. But if you have a ritual that you have to do that, then whatever else you are doing, you drop it and you go do that. And that requires a certain discipline. You don't think of it as discipline because you're dying to do it, so you go do it. But it is the other rituals, like puja, or every morning what your mom or grandmother does, or says some mantras, ring some bells. It is also the same thing. It makes her feel part of a larger thing, maybe a part of a community that is all worshipping the same god and saying the same mantras. And this is important for human beings. We are not, no man is an island. We like to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Like RCB fans, that is a community, that is a religion, in a sense, that is a ritual. So we all like to be part of that, and that's why rituals. So when you grow up, you'll realize that because you were part of those family rituals, whether they're puja or something, they have certain warm memories of belonging, which especially when you leave family and go away and study in a different country, that keeps you moored and anchored, the memories of those, that they are all my people. And you can have another set of people wherever you go, but rituals are definitely important. And basically, I personally think rituals are really important, like our kind of rituals, whether it is doing a puja. And I tell children, why don't you practice other rituals? Create your own.
Yeah.
Create your own, like sitting with yourself 10 minutes at the end of each day and introspecting about all the Kurukshetras you handled that day, all the Kurukshetras you battled through. What were the moral dilemmas? Were you part of a group where somebody was bad mouthing somebody else, one of your friends, but she was not present and your friends were bad mouthing her, and you were standing there And the dilemma was, should I say something or should I not? And you chose to go with the Kauravas who were saying, and there are always 100 Kauravas and only 5 Pandavas that live within us. So Kauravas saying, no, 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 just be quiet, because if you say something, then your friends will think you're a sissy and they won't sit with you at lunch tomorrow. So then you listen to them and you keep quiet. But when you come away, you're not feeling good about it. So talk to your Krishna every night about, this is what happened and this is what I did, but Krishna, it didn't make me feel good. And then Krishna, who knows you better than anybody else and always has your back and knows what advice to give you, will probably say things like, yeah, I know. So next time, choose the better option. Or if you don't feel the courage to say anything yet, because moral courage has to be built over many years and many actions, then at least leave the group. Make an excuse, leave. Don't stand there and let that toxic stuff get into your head. So he will give you advice like that, and that's how you get out of it. So those rituals, at least you start following, I said. And then when you do that, and Krishna won't be your best friend like he was Arjuna's if you don't talk to him every day. I mean, Arjuna had invested a lot of time and effort and love in that friendship. That is why in the battlefield he could just put it in Krishna's hands and say, you tell me, because he trusted him so completely that you can't trust your own Krishna unless you have taken his advice, built a friendship, know that he will always give you good advice. Then you won't follow that. So you have to. So
And
as a discipline, as a rich,
like you say
sorry,
in your book, talk to your closest friend, your inner voice, often and at length.
At length, yeah. And I said, try this ritual of 10 minutes every day talking to your Krishna. And I promise you, you will fall asleep the third night, or you'll forget it. There'll be some. And only when you do 1 week or 15 days of this, and you feel like, my God, now I truly feel like in control of the situation. I think I have something good going on here. That's when you realize how much discipline is required to maintain any ritual, even a ritual that you like. And then you will have an appreciation for your grandmother or your parents who do this every morning. It's not easy.
Right.
And it is the discipline that you build by doing rituals that will help you achieve better things mentally and spiritually later. Because our first barrier, our easiest barrier, not our first barrier, most accessible barrier to anything, or the instrument of anything, is our body. If we can discipline our body through ritual, whether it is saying only 5 chips a day, only 5 kurkure pieces or whatever, or it is about, I will do my 10-minute walk every morning before school, it is through that. And once you have bodily discipline, the mental strength becomes so big, your own self-confidence that I can do this. Man, I set myself a challenge and I actually finished it. I set myself this challenge that I'll wake up and either, recite the tables from 12 to 19 every morning, or I will learn these 3 mantras, which will make my mom happy or dad happy every morning. And whatever it is, if you do that, then you say, I can take on another challenge, a bigger one. So that self-confidence, that Atma Vishwasa that comes from any kind of discipline, that is why ritual is important. And the Vedas, I tell them always, the first 2 sections of Vedas, the Samhitas and the Brahmanas, are the Karma Kanda. And then there is the Gnana Kanda, which is the Aranyakas and the Upanishads. And the fact that the Vedas have both the Karma Kanda and the Gnana Kanda as part of them, and especially the Upanishads in the Gnana Kanda actually reject the ritual.
Yeah.
They say of the earlier part, they say that is not necessary. And the Vedas are still including them as part of them, is only to demonstrate that it's only by going through the lower, or the ritual, the lower knowledge, that you can even hope to seek the higher. The kind of discipline that it requires to learn things by heart, and everything was orally transmitted. So if you can get that part done and commit all that to memory, then your memory becomes stronger, your mental strength becomes stronger, your self-confidence becomes stronger, and that's how you're able to then jump to the next plane.
Right. And rituals is that discipline that brings into us.
Yeah.
And also
Women, you said, sorry.
Even
Go on.
before we do the any rituals, there's this thing called sankalpa that we do,
Yeah.
which is the the intention. So basically, rituals is intentions translated into action and discipline. And that's
Yeah.
what I would say it. So how about the second part of my
Second
question?
part of the
Women
question.
being
Yeah, yeah,
treated
yeah.
below men in the scriptures.
Yeah. So this is just my own thing. In most of the scripture, I think it's just populated by men. I mean, whether it's the Gita, the whole conversation happens between two male
Hmm.
figures. And in the Upanishads, it's usually a male guru talking to a male student. Although there is Maitri and Gargi and all are mentioned, and they are big part of the Upanishads, but it's basically this. I think they're always, if we consider them sins of not having more female representation, is the word they use nowadays. So why is there so little female representation? It's because the men were the ones writing these texts.
Hmm.
So obviously, I mean, the women were doing something else entirely, and their voices were not heard because they were not writing texts. They were doing other things that were equally important, but they were not part of this part, which was, and I don't think that doesn't mean that the revelations did not come to them. The revelation is something that comes to anyone who is focused and one pointed and all that. And those revelations, they would have translated into teaching their children or making their own lives better or being role models for anybody around them. They probably didn't write it down or say it or teach it to anybody. And so I feel these are sins of, if we consider them sins, this lack of representation, then it's a sin of omission,
Hmm.
not of commission. Nobody in the Vedas or nobody is saying that women are lower or anything. They are just not there. They are not mentioned. And the reason, then also we must remember that these are very old texts, and there have been so much selection along the way. And the selection would have been done by actual human beings
Right.
who had reasons for selecting certain texts over others and things like that. So I feel I just think this is, and Purusha, which is the cosmic being, doesn't mean male at all. It's just a masculine aspect, and the Prakriti is the feminine aspect. And these two are playing off against each other all the time. But both are equally important.
Yeah.
And the yin and yang that is needed for the
Right.
world to function properly. So, I think it's a very 21st century conceit or a 20th century conceit to demand why aren't women represented. I mean, there could be so many reasons, and why should we even bother about that now? The truths are available to everybody, no, and women can also read. Women can go to the original text. You can take it up, use it. They
Right.
haven't, there is nobody saying you can't use it. So
Yeah, and
it's a
I also kind of feel sometimes perhaps the ancient India was more a duty bound society, and each person in different ashramas were of their life stages, and also based on the role what they were doing, a husband or a wife or a male child or a female child, they had a certain set of duties what they were doing. And the women folk played a much larger role than just sitting and reading scriptures and understanding it, because they were providing the basis for the rest of the people to be able to do that. And maybe that could be the reason, one of the reasons why these scriptures did not be
also,
dominated by
I think
women
there was
women
so
writers.
so many more scriptures there must have been.
Yeah,
What has come down to us is a few, and
correct.
why these were chosen to be popular, and because none of the by the also we have to remember that none of these scriptures are attributed to a particular rishi or anything.
Right, right,
They are revelation, so they could have come through rishikas also. And if we say that Veda Vyasa, I mean, the way how many things are attributed to Veda Vyasa, how many things are attributed to Shankara, it's almost as if they must have all lived for some 500 600 years, if that were to be true. And the reason I think that people attach works with their name, or attached works with their name, was to make sure that if it says it comes from Shankara, then it's bound to be more popular. So this is a really
right,
important text.
right.
So let us say Shankara, then everybody will take it seriously. Credibility increases. So it could be those kinds of things that have led to what, I mean, the Manu Smriti, even Manu Smriti, if you take, which is so reviled, so much of it, scholars haven't been able to figure out which period some of it was added.
Yeah.
In different periods, things have got, there are accretions from various periods, and now what we can get is many authors have been part of it. It's not
Right.
some pure text that has, and that is all part of Smriti. It's not even Shruti. So everybody feels within their rights to keep adding to it and changing it, and
Right.
so
So,
so
so
it's
Rupa,
very
Rupa,
difficult to judge. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I
it's
know
been
it's very late.
awesome to talk with you today. One last question. I know that there are lot many more questions, but I'm going to quickly summarize and ask you one last
Sorry.
question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There are a
And I'll keep it shorter.
bunch of guys and girls in this group who are budding aspiring authors, right? And what is your advice for an aspiring author? And importantly, how did your writing process change after you studied the Gita?
Ah, I think much less fear after studying the Gita, in the sense that when I sent the Gita for Children out into the world, I remember the day before it was launched, I was really scared. I was very anxious, very nervous, because like I say to children, like Rick Riordan can write whatever he wants about the Greek gods, because nobody worships them anymore. But in India, when you take on something like the Gita, it's a living, breathing, vibrant text. It is very alive in the minds and hearts of people here. And any kind of disrespect or dilution or something misinterpretation can lead to a lot of pain to a lot of people, and then it could become something else. And although I had got it vetted by scholars, I mean, in the end, once it leaves your hand, this is for all writers, once you press send on your manuscript, it is not yours anymore. It belongs to the world, it belongs to the reader, and every reader has entirely that right to interpret it as he or she, and receive it as he or she wishes. You can't say, but I didn't mean that. Who know? You didn't mean that, but that's what I read. That's what I got out of it. Um, so I was very fearful. And then nothing happened. I was really expecting some, people throwing stones at my house and things like that, that I must have done something wrong. Because you see, as I mentioned earlier, I came from a place of not knowing anything about it at all. Sure, when I began to read it, appealed to me totally, and I was totally, there was great harmony when I was writing it, but I didn't know how it would be received. But once that did not happen, it gave me the courage to 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 not have these biases about subjects and things and people. Just allow yourselves to receive, go with humility, go with an open mind, and every subject will speak to you. Every topic, however difficult or boring, or just put those preconceived notions aside and allow the subject to talk to you. And that's why the next book I took on was economics. I didn't know anything about economics, but writing the Gita and having it be well received gave me the courage to try something else new, which I had never tried. And then go with it with joy, go into it with joy, not with fear, and explore. So that,
And
and what is my writing process, that's how it changed, actually, my writing process. Yeah,
right, and you're living your dharma of a writer.
yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, and this is my, not only my, if it's my dharma, that's great, because it's also what I love doing. So if those two match, that's wonderful. So, yeah.
All right. So we took more time than uh, what we thought
Yes,
we would
sorry
take.
guys. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Not
much
at
for
all.
your
Thank you. Thank you.
wonderful talk today with us, and
Thank you.
truly grateful that you could spend some time with us. Thank you so much. Hari Om.
Thank you. Thank you, Hari Om. Thank you, Ajay.